Hello and welcome to today's global webinar series on India's vaccination diplomacy. My name is Amrutha, and together with Lokesh, we will be moderating today's discussion. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Madhumati Deshpande. Dr. Madhumati is an assistant professor at Christ University, India, for the Department of International Studies, Political Science, and History. She has a keen interest in Indian foreign policy, international relations, and political theory. Her expertise in the field is illustrated through her numerous publications, such as her article on sports diplomacy and international relations in India. She has shared her views and knowledge locally and internationally through various seminars such as today. With the world's attention on vaccines, we are privileged to hear from Dr. Madhumati about how India is leveraging its pharmaceutical capacities to make a mark and learn about its effects. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them through the Q&A chat. We'll be answering questions at the end of the sharing. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Madhumati.
Thank you, Amrutha, and thanks to Singapore University of Social Sciences for inviting me to this webinar. I'm very happy to talk about India's vaccine diplomacy because this is a very hotly debated, talked about topic within India and outside of India as well. The pandemic has brought us to a different level of international relations, a different dialogue in the international relations. The dialogue that used to be all about wars and conflicts and arms race and other kinds of global calamities has now shifted everything towards global healthcare and pandemic, and how do we take care of the people? What kind of medical equipment do we have? What kind of medical equipment do we get from which country? All of these are the issues that people now have to worry about, not just the people, but the countries have to now worry about. So at this juncture, what we call in international relations as global health diplomacy or global or the usage of soft power is now being talked about in the discipline, and this is international relations and political science. So before I go further into this, I would like to share a couple of pictures that are really a powerful images that come through in the media for both India and other countries. If you see, the picture that I showed before, the first picture here on the left talks about India's vaccine Maitri. Vaccine Maitri is the vaccine friendship of India, and this is a plaque holding when they sent the vaccines to Sri Lanka. The second picture you can easily make out. This is the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. He's receiving the dose of coronavirus disease vaccine at the vaccination center in Dhanachala. Of course, this is not the one that is going abroad, but it's a powerful image which shows the trust within the vaccine that India is sending out. And that's something that actually says that India is using this image to boost its own image in the international relations, because this is a trusted vaccine. And I will come back to this. I just wanted to share a couple of these images. The other two are, this is another one that has gone to Canada, a vaccine that is being distributed by Serum Institute of India, and that has reached Canada. And this is the other picture, which is in a very prominent magazine in India. That's India Today magazine. So it says India has begun sending made in India vaccines to several countries. So then they've listed all of this is of course a little older picture, which has a lot of these vaccines distributed everywhere. But it is a powerful image that brings in both for Indians and for the people abroad, in showing how India has become a responsible country that is not only taking care of its own people, but is contributing to the healthcare of the world. And this is something that is helpful both for India and for the outside countries as well. This comes during the time when most of the countries, like the United States under Trump, like UK, like all of the developing countries had started, what is known as vaccine nationalism. They were trying to buy off vaccines from these big companies because they needed them first. They had to take care of their own population. Because it's natural for everybody to take care of their own population. But at that kind of a time period, when you start showing this kind of images that you are distributing vaccines, there is something that India is trying to communicate with the rest of the world. And that's what we are going to talk about today. And that exactly is what diplomacy is all about. So I would like to start with, defining diplomacy, because I don't want to assume that everybody knows the exact meaning of diplomacy. So I would like to use a couple of very commonly understood definitions of diplomacy. One is diplomacy is the established method of influencing the decisions and behavior of foreign governments and people through dialogue, negotiations, and other means short of war or violence. And diplomacy is the counter to war or violence. And easily with war or violence, you can influence the decisions of the other countries. But here we are talking about influencing without that force, without violence, without war. You're trying to influence the other people. Diplomacy is the chief but not the only instrument of foreign policy, which is set by political leaders and implemented through diplomats who advise them. So diplomacy and foreign policy are not one and the same. Diplomacy and foreign policy are different because foreign policy is the policy set by the political leaders for reaching a certain goal for their own, promoting their national interest. But diplomacy is putting in practice what that policy that has been made, or implementing the policy that has been made by the political leaders. So again, as we, if we can focus it, if we can make it more focused, we can say diplomacy is the art and science of furthering one's national interest through tact and perseverance. So what is the purpose of diplomacy then? The purpose of diplomacy is to strengthen the state, nation, or organization that it serves in relation to others by advancing the interest in its charge. So diplomacy does look at its own national interest. So if India is trying vaccine diplomacy, it has to have certain reason for promoting its own national interest. And that's where the diplomacy part comes in. Not only are we trying to promote our own national interest, but also at the same time, we are helping the population of the world. And that's what the whole trying to influence the decisions and behaviors of the other foreign governments. And this is what diplomacy is all about. And this is why it becomes important to understand what India is trying to achieve through this vaccine diplomacy. Yes, the first point is definitely that, we want to distribute it to the rest of the world because India has been, of course, it's important to help global health diplomacy. And India has already worked with Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria. India is also a part of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, which is the GAVI, G-A-V-I, the Global Alliance of Vaccines and Immunization. So India has been contributing, also receiving the vaccines for the people here in India. So we are already a part of that global alliance. So if we already are doing so much, then why is this different? Why is vaccine diplomacy during this global pandemic, is it different? Okay, so what does India hope to gain from this? Why do we do this vaccine diplomacy? Why is that important at all? So what is vaccine diplomacy? Vaccine diplomacy is sharing of the vaccines to the rest of the world, which is not manufacturing the vaccines. There are only a few countries that are actually producing the vaccines. There may be countries who have done research in production of the vaccine, but they don't have the capacity to produce millions and millions of doses of vaccination. So India comes into that level because India has the capacity to produce that many doses of vaccinations. And so AstraZeneca, which is the pharmaceutical company, Oxford University, AstraZeneca together developed this vaccine called the Covishield, which is being manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, which is the one that started manufacturing it without waiting for the complete, approval process to take through, because they believed in that vaccine. So they had a good jump over everybody else, and they started producing the vaccines. And that's why they were able to ship it off immediately once they got the approval. They were able to ship off the vaccines to different countries. And when you're producing millions of doses of vaccine, if you don't use it off by the certain period, they may not, it may get wasted. So India started its vaccination drive. It's a huge, biggest vaccination drive, as everybody has been talking about. Of course, it has to be the biggest because we have the second biggest population. So we have to vaccinate all of those people. So initially it was for healthcare workers. So we had to prioritize who we are vaccinating. So the doses may be available. There may be hospitals, but then how do you bring the two together? That's what that's what is required. That infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, is required to immunize the population. And that's where some of the countries in the West are struggling, because United States and UK and other the Western countries, their healthcare infrastructure, even though it's one of the best healthcare infrastructure, they have limited number of hospitals and limited number of doctors. So if you are vaccinating people, you will have to get them to line up and start the vaccination process. So that takes a little bit of time when the number is limited. So even the same, India is not as bad as those countries, because we do have a lot of government hospitals for all of the countries, along with private hospitals. So it is much easier for them to distribute the vaccines and get people vaccinated. So yes, it becomes the biggest vaccination drive, and we are vaccinating people. But the number of doses that are being produced by the Serum Institute of India, they need to be distributed as well. So what India decided to do was to make use of the pharmacy of the world, boosting the image as a pharmacy of the world, because we do have that capacity to produce doses, millions of doses of vaccines to be distributed around the world. So we made use of that. And through that, the diplomacy part here is that, yes, we would like to distribute it to the rest of the world because we have the capacity, but they may not have the capacity. At the same time, we are even helping those countries who may not be able to afford the vaccine for all of the countries. India was at one point of time, we have been there. So we understand the problems of the developing world. So we decided that this is our time to share what we have with the other countries. And that's what diplomacy is trying to achieve through this. Of course, we hope to gain a symbolic capital, which is, what do we mean by symbolic capital is that, yes, the trust between the countries, the trust between the neighborhood of India, like for India, for example, India, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, the trust between the two countries improves because, yes, in trouble, we are there to help you. When the disaster strikes, we are there to help you. This is what we do even when other disasters strike, disaster aid is sent to different countries. But even at this time, when we have a pandemic situation and every country is now struggling to control the pandemic and secure the health of all of their citizens, we are now stepping in here and saying, okay, we will help you in trying to vaccinate all of your population. And so India has been able to provide those doses, millions of doses of vaccines, some free of cost, some as a loan, some for actually they have been able to sell it to the countries, and some have been donated to the vaccination, the COVAX drive, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization. So all of this, they were able to do because the capacity as a pharmacy of the world. As I mentioned here, Covishield manufactured under the license from Oxford AstraZeneca and Covaxin, developed by Bharat Biotech, are low-cost, highly effective serums that are easy to store and transport compared to Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna vaccines. This Pfizer one and the Moderna vaccines were the first ones to be released in UK, but we could not use those. Many of the developing countries do not have the infrastructure to hold it at minus 70 degree Fahrenheit and transport it at that temperature to the people that need the vaccines. So this, Covishield and Covaxin became our vaccines that can be distributed in the developing world because they don't require that kind of an infrastructure. This also shows, that we are being a responsible regional power. So yes, India has aspirations of becoming one of the powers that will be represented in the United Nations, and India has been trying to reform the United Nations Security Council to get representation for India in there. So this is, this is showing to the world that yes, we have the capacity. Yes, we can produce as many doses of vaccines as possible, but we are also a responsible power because we will share that what we have with the rest of the world. We will not hoard it. We will not say it's only for our people. We will share the same with everybody else, even though we can actually at this time use all of the vaccinations. And as I said, improving bilateral relations with Vaccine Maitri. And the last point, I will come back to the last point after I show you a couple of other images. I will come back to this, focusing on humanist diplomacy as opposed to mercantile diplomacy. As of March 18th, 2021, India has supplied vaccines to 72 countries and to the United Nations health workers. Of the 57 million doses, 13% are grants, 58% and 58% are sales. Sorry, I missed out that. And 28% are under the COVAX facility, an initiative of the World Health Organization to provide fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines to every country in the world. Okay. And this is another image. Sorry, this is another image that I wanted to talk about. This is the COVID-19. It's coming on the plane this is a picture at Brazil, when the COVID vaccine went to Brazil, that this is the picture that came up. That India is bringing this, magical miracle drug to this to Brazil because they were talking about a mythological character called Hanuman. I'm not sure how many of you know about Hanuman. Hanuman bringing a Sanjeevani, the whole mountain, to bring one medicine to his god, that is Rama. So that was depicted. The mythology and the current situation was depicted in this picture. So it's a pride for India as well, because we are now being recognized for what we have had before, which is being the pharmacy of the world, having the biggest scientific community that educated scientific community that is very good in research and development. And this recognition India is getting of late because of the vaccine diplomacy that we've been promoting. And that's exactly what they want to show it to the world as well, that we do have that capacity. Yes, you may consider India as developing world. We may have all troubles in the world. Our own cases are increasing, but that does not matter because this is something that we are good at. This is something that we can share with the rest of the world. And that's why it becomes important as India's interest to promote in the rest of the world. And this is just the number of doses that are given as grants and the number of doses that are sold to different countries in the world. And recently, I don't think this list has Canada in it. Canada also bought about 200,000 or 300,000 doses from India. And that was something that, again, pride for India, a situation of pride for India, because it does promote India as the pharmacy of the world, and it brings the attention to what India is doing as a responsible regional power. And we are not talking about, especially during the time when China, United States, even other Western countries are either promoting nationalism, and of course, China is not about the vaccine nationalism. China is about trying to bring China's influence into other countries. What is the difference, you may ask me, because we are also trying to influence the rest of the world. China is also doing the same. But there are reports. I mean, this is I'm not. I don't want to discredit what China has done with the vaccine diplomacy, but there are reports of China not delivering the doses that they have been asking for in many of the countries. Of course, China is the first country that has supplied the vaccine to Pakistan. That it probably would have been a better story to tell if India was the one who would sold vaccines to Pakistan. That would have solved a lot of bilateral issues, but it was China who's provided the vaccines to Pakistan. It has also provided to several other countries. There is almost like a competition between China and India in who distributes vaccines more effectively and whose vaccines are more effective and more trusted in the world. So there were countries who did not trust China's vaccine. And of course, China has suffered, the image, China's image has suffered because it was the country where the pandemic originated from. So now they're trying to boost their, or change their image in the world by distributing vaccines everywhere. But that's, it takes time to improve that image. So there are countries in the world who do not trust the Chinese vaccine. And that, of course, that leaves us with other options, which are, of course, India and, the other Pfizer vaccines or Moderna vaccines, or even Sputnik from Russia, which again suffers the image problem because not many people trust those vaccines. So India's vaccine becomes, one of those, even if it is not 100% successful, we prefer that over China. That's the trust, that's the credibility that India is showing through the vaccine distribution that they're doing. Of course, India is also inoculating its own population. So the biggest vaccine drive is also, helping boost that image as well. The last point that I wanted to talk about is focusing on the humanist diplomacy as opposed to mercantile diplomacy. So, of course, what happens during a pandemic or any other disaster time is that, yes, we have this kind of a resource, we will sell it to you or we will buy it from you. That becomes a more business transaction between the countries. And that also becomes, mercantile diplomacy. Yes, we have this foreign trade. You give us this kind of a discount or a tariff or reduction in tariff, we will sell that to you. So you are making money out of the need of the other country. This is what, of course, it's normal economics, and it's not, it's not illegal to do that. It is normal for everybody to do that. But during the disaster time, during the time of the pandemic, there has to be some more consideration towards who can afford this. And if they can't afford this, can we still give it to them? And that's where the humanist diplomacy that is coming forth from India. And India was known for that idealistic diplomacy even before. And we believed in that, the moral highness of India's diplomacy, which is that we do want to have a peaceful world, and we do believe in international cooperation. So, but how do you promote that? How do you promote that in a world which is globalized, which is fast moving in the economic direction? How do you promote this idealism of moralistic, humanistic diplomacy? And this was one of those examples wherein India was able to show to the rest of the world that even if there is a need within India for all of the vaccines, we are still able to perform much better. We are still able to distribute it to the rest of the world. So this becomes, this is the advantage that India is gaining through this vaccine diplomacy. It's not, it's not the power that we are going to get through the vaccine diplomacy. It's not, not all of the problems in the world may not solve with just the vaccine diplomacy. But yes, it improves India's image outside, and that way it promotes India's friendship with other countries. And this is one way. This is the soft power way of doing, business with other countries. Not enforcing anybody, not forcing everybody to accept India as a regional power. None of that. It's about showing to the rest of the world that we do care, and that's humanist diplomacy that we want to promote through vaccine diplomacy. And this is what we are trying to promote through India's vaccine diplomacy. I would like to stop here and open up for questions. If you have any, that would I will bring in more points through the question and answer sessions.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Madhumati, for sharing with us more about India's Western diplomacy. So it was really informative to know. So looking at everything that you've shown, right? So the one question that does come to my mind immediately is like, some of the countries that India shares the vaccination with, like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So they do have, a history of like a strained relationship with India. So is this really like forging a new relationship or strengthening it, or it's more like, like reducing the strain and like addressing old wounds? Yeah. So do you think that, like these countries will remember India's help this in the future, or will it be out of mind? I mean, out of sight, out of mind?
Yeah, that's we hope. I mean, that's the hope that is there with the diplomacy that's going on right now. That in times of crisis, they will remember that India had supplied this kind of vaccines to the countries when they were in need. And so, yes, it may not be that, it may not look like India is ready for any sort of compromise, but looking at the past performance, maybe that India will be amenable to certain compromises. So let's step back from the crisis and let's move more towards diplomacy. And that's the hope that, India, that's the hope that India has through this diplomacy, not just with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, but every other country. So when Canada, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called up Narendra Modi, it was in the middle of a crisis that was going on between India and Canada, because Canada had made some sort of remarks on the farmers' riots that were going on in India. So at that point of time, if you can pause all of that animosity, or not just animosity, just, our indifferences that we had about whatever we do domestically, but you pause that because you are more worried about the health of your own population. You need that vaccination. So we are not going to say, oh no, I'm not going to talk to Canada because they said something wrong about what happened in, because of the farmers' riots. We will, because that's a responsibility of a nation. That's a responsibility of a country that can produce vaccines. So when Canada calls, India does provide those vaccines. So India doesn't say, no, I won't supply those doses to you because you said something wrong about our farmers' rights. So in a way, they're trying to say that, vaccine diplomacy helps reduce the tension between the countries. It may not solve all of the problems, but at least it will change the image that they have of each other.
I understand. So another question that does come to my mind is like, a lot of countries do have like this vaccine nationalism, as you have said, so whereby they like hoard the vaccines for their own population first. But I'm sure like it is not beyond the logical reasoning of like these countries to know that, like you have to, other people from other countries also have to be vaccinated for the people within their country to be safe as well. And then, the advantage of, providing vaccine diplomacy, their own vaccine diplomacy. So during a crisis like this. So do you think maybe there is some wisdom to like, why these countries might not be pursuing the same strategy as India?
Yeah, so one is that, they want to inoculate their own population first, and that, they can't afford to send all the vaccines out of their countries. So they will take care of their people first. That is understandable. That is possible. The other reason why vaccines are being distributed is that they don't have the capacity to produce the doses in such a big number at a short period of time. So for India, it's only about 53 days since the vaccine was approved until today. And this many doses have been already produced and shipped to other countries, which means that we have the capacity to produce more. And when you have that capacity, why not share it? So that's the other point that is coming through, is that it is showing to the world that, yes, we have that infrastructure, we have the pharmacies, we have the industrial base to produce that kind of a vaccine dosage. And it boosts India's image as a manufacturing country. Yes, it is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. It is not the one that was researched in India. But even then, the Bharat Biotech, the Covaxin that is coming in, that is the made in India product. That is one that is researched upon. So it also shows that we have that scientific base. It shows that we have the manufacturing base. So that's another way of promoting your own country. It's not just about, you're distributing vaccine, but it is also about promoting what you have, the industry, the manufacturing capacity, the labor, the population, the research capacity, all of that you're promoting to the outside world as well.
Thank you for your answer, Doctor. Another question that we kind of came up with was, what do you think is some of the immediate or post-COVID economic benefits that India might gain from the vaccine diplomacy it's doing currently?
Yeah, so as I pointed out before, we were the pharmacy of the world. We've had several, issues that have come up in the World Trade Organization, wherein there have been questions about the copyright issues, the patent issues, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. India has had conflicts with the United States over, this patent and copyright issues. That has, they are in the World Trade Organization right now. So what we hope to achieve is that by showing to the rest of the world that, it's not just about ensuring profit for your own companies, but it is also about the global health, which means that countries should be allowed to produce generic drugs. Countries should be allowed to have, the patent. Yes, patent will ensure newer research in the area, but it also is important to look at the other side of the healthcare, which is, distributing cheaper and more effective drugs to the population that may not be able to afford it. And that way you're ensuring global health. So by this vaccine diplomacy, that's again another, benefit that we may get, that we are being recognized as somebody who can do this. So by not insisting on the patents, not insisting on the brand names, if you can get the formula to India, it's possible to help the rest of the world as well. So, manufacturing cheaper drugs and manufacturing it in such a huge number, it is possible for India. So that is a boost that we are going to get for our pharmaceutical industry and healthcare industry here in India. India is also being known as a destination for health travel, medical tourism. Because there were people coming to India for various surgeries, and especially for developing countries, India is one place where they can. It's an affordable medical care that they can get. So many people from different countries were also coming to India for medical tourism purpose, and that's what again, that's another point that may be in India's favor through this vaccine diplomacy that we can say.
Thank you once again, Dr. Madhumati. So we do have a question from the audience. So the question was like, so can we look at this vaccine diplomacy as more of a political and economic tool rather than act of India to extend help and support?
Yeah.
So you did kind of answer it, but would you be able to clearly tell us more? Like, so is this a political tool?
Yeah, so I know I mentioned it in my slide before that it's not a mercantile diplomacy, but a humanist diplomacy. It's both. That's why we say diplomacy, because that's why I defined diplomacy in the beginning, that you have to promote your own national interest through diplomacy. You are trying to influence other people, and that's why it's not a charity, it's diplomacy. If it is charity, I think we would have donated. We would have just donated everything. We would really not worry about who it is going to or which other countries. We would not make such a big deal out of who we are donating it to. But it is called diplomacy, and it is about promoting your own national interest. So even though you're using it as a political or an economic tool, you have it's not a pure economic transaction. You are taking into consideration who can afford it. So if you will give it as a grant and you will send it to those countries that are in need first. So Vaccine Maitri, especially focusing on the neighborhood. India said neighborhood first. So we will send it to all of the countries that are around us that may need this vaccine. So they don't have to depend on somebody else. So it is a political tool because you're helping your neighbors first and not let China come in. And you're trying to make sure that, all of these countries are given the boost first. But at the same time, you're taking care that you're not selling it to them, you're giving it as a grant. So they may, return the grant at any point of time, it doesn't matter. So you're not selling it, exactly selling it to these countries. And you're promoting, yes, India's friendship to these countries by supplying it and not just promising it, but actually bringing the vaccine to those countries. So it is economic and political tool, and that's why it is diplomacy, but it is more diplomacy with a little bit of human consideration.
Thank you. So we kind of have a tough question here from the audience.
Okay.
So internally, India has seen communal and racial disharmony arising out of the pandemic. Will India's internal vaccination campaign hold the same altruistic tone as its export efforts? And how has the process been?
Okay. I'm not sure if we can associate pandemic to the communal riots and disharmony that's in India. Communal disharmony and the problems associated with religion and caste and everything else has been there in India even before the pandemic. It's not the pandemic that caused it. So yes, I don't know if everybody has actually watched different countries and how different countries have looked at the pandemic and looked at the vaccination. Some countries have refused to take the vaccination because they say that, you should not interfere in God's work. That's not what India is doing. The vaccination drive that is going on does not see this kind of a disparity coming in through, because they prioritize the healthcare workers initially, then they prioritize the older people who are more prone to getting this kind, the COVID-19 virus much more easily. So they have focused on those people, and they are now moving into the next lot, which is prone to getting that, and that's 50 and above, and with comorbidity. So it is not the vaccination drive so far has not been biased towards any religion or any group or anybody. And pandemic also has not caused it. Yes, it's been there, but it's not been affecting the vaccination drive. That's for sure, because everybody is as scared as everybody else is. What did happen is, yes, through the lockdown that had happened, it was not the racial discrimination, it was the class discrimination that we saw. Because yes, the lockdown was supposed to help the people get back to their own houses, but there were a group of people who were forgotten, because this is the migrant workers. They could not stay in the house if they didn't have a daily wages. So there were many people who came together to help them. So we have seen a lot of charity work, or a lot of people coming together to help the people who didn't have enough to eat. So pandemic has actually bridged that racial disharmony, class distinction. Yes, the government policy may have overlooked it, but the people themselves have stood up to help the other people. So I'm hoping that pandemic actually reduces this kind of a disparity in India, and through the immunization program that is going on. Of course, it is immunization. People in India, if you have understood India and in India's population and the attitudes that India have, they believe in the doctors. They have such faith in doctors. They never questioned before as to what kind of a vaccine I'm going to get. And this is the same faith they have in the healthcare sector as well. They never question their doctors. If you say I have to take an injection, if you say I have to take an immunization, I will go ahead and do it. They will never question it. So the doctors are actually treated as gods here, because they help you, they cure you. So that that hopefully will lead to everybody getting the vaccine and not refusing to take vaccines, which happens in many of the other countries because they don't trust the companies that are producing the vaccines. They don't trust the doctors, or they have beliefs that make them think that vaccination is there are some countries who thought that vaccination would lead to sterilization, and that the government is this is a conspiracy by the government to sterilize everybody. So there are number of stories that you hear in the world. That's not reflected in India. Yes, there may be a small group of people who may have said, yeah, I don't want to take the vaccine because I don't trust it. But those are not stories that you hear more here in India.
Actually,
I would say,
yeah, sorry, doctor. Actually, the fact that I'm calling you a doctor a lot, it all shows that everyone in the Asian culture, not only in India, like China, Singapore, everyone does put the doctors in a pedestal. So
yes, yeah. So we do have that. So doctors are trusted more.
Yeah,
and so we don't have anybody saying I don't want to take it.
Yeah. So I personally, I do have a tough question for you. So you said before that there's a difference between like diplomacy and foreign policy. And foreign policy is whereby it is something that is pursued by the political leader, and then diplomacy is whereby you do have some nationalistic interests. So what about in the case where the political leader in India right now is someone who has nationalistic interests? So is this India's Western diplomacy, or is this Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Western diplomacy?
Well, it is led by Prime Minister right now, so we would have to say Modi's diplomacy, and Modi's legacy may have this vaccine diplomacy added to it. As we study foreign policy, it does get, in India especially, the Prime Minister becomes the decision maker, and it goes in his legacy. So we call it Nehru's non-alignment and Gujral doctrine of non-reciprocity. So it gets associated with the person in power at the time. So yeah, it may get associated with Narendra Modi and say Narendra Modi's vaccine diplomacy because he is at the helm right now. But if it was anybody else, it would have been their diplomacy too. As in, the capacity is, you can't really neglect the capacity that we have. So whoever is in power would have been their diplomacy. It would not be specifically that he came up with it in his strategy. It is the capacity of India. It is the need of the hour right now. So yes, you take advantage of it, and it gets included in your name at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Another one from the audience. The latest quadrilateral security dialogue seen India and her allies agreeing to export vaccines to counter China. Is there a way to put this confronted policy aside?
Yeah, so I think I'm seeing another question here on the Chinese competition of vaccines in India's neighborhood. Well, I can say that I'm not going to say that India is not in competition with China. I'm going to say that even if there is a competition, it's not going to be, who's the winner in this competition at all. Yes, who will provide more vaccines and whose vaccines are more trusted is what we are going to look at. Whose vaccines are going to be more effective. And last, the production also has to last, manufacturing also has to last and provide for more countries. So it can't be that we produced and we exported and we are done with it. It's not going to be that, because this vaccination is going to take time. It's not going to be over in 1 year. So who is going to continue to do the same through the next 2 or 3 years? Is it possible for China to do it? Will China overtake India in the production and maybe give it to somebody else? That's a competition. That's one of the competitions. The other competition is by competing with China, by saying that there is an alternative to China, India is trying to make sure in the neighborhood that China is not the only option, that there is India who is also capable in this arena, that India can provide for this. So that way, there is that competition. But as I said, that competition, we have to see how far it will go in the next 2-3 years. It's not going to end in any time soon. So not an arms race, who has the best of the arms, who has the best vaccine here. how many can you supply to the rest of the world? How long can you supply to the rest of the world? That's the competition.
But Dr. Madhumati, I do have to ask you, like, do you not think that China may take this personally? Because I do think that they wanted to like redeem themselves in a way by helping to vaccinate the world. So India's this vaccine diplomacy might be directly hurting China. And also, like, we do know that India, especially Prime Minister Narendra Modi, did try to like ease the tension between India and China and pursue a better relationship. So would this in the future, like, not reduce any possibilities of India and China having a good relationship?
I wouldn't think it would reduce the, it would create problems for India and China because India is doing well with the vaccine distribution. I would say it may change the perception of China towards India. And that's the hope, as in, yeah, so China should also consider India as not as the same power, but somebody who they can respect because they have the capacity. And that's what we are hoping through this competition, not to just put down China, because economically China is strong. There is no way India can catch up to the Chinese economy in the near future. Yes, there are there are reports that say that if India is able to recover in this year, that we will overtake China in the next 5 years. That's for sure. That's the that's what this pandemic has brought in. That's economically that's possible, but there is no competition. I mean, in terms of what China is capable of and what India is capable of. But if China can look at India as a as respect India's capabilities, then there is already a change in the way China looks at India. It wouldn't be like a small power who's just struggling down south here, but it's also as an equal power, especially with regards to science and technology, with regards to manufacturing capacity, especially in the pharmaceutical field. So it's that change in attitude that we are looking for, not a complete surrender to India because we lost in the Chinese in the vaccine diplomacy. That's not going to happen.
Great, thank you. So do you think that if countries do remember the efforts India has put in during this vaccine diplomacy, and in like other countries do remember, do you think India is ready to be a superpower?
I don't think so. Yeah, maybe some politicians hope that India will be a superpower anytime soon, but you have to be pragmatic in international relations and look at your strengths and your weaknesses. If we had the strength, nobody will have to tell you that you are a superpower. You would be a superpower. You would be considered one already. So because we have those weaknesses, that you are not recognized as a superpower. And so it's not, yes, India wants to be recognized or respected as a power, as an emerging power. We do have our problems, but we do have the, 1/5 of the population of the world. So it should get that kind of a recognition and the respect that it deserves. And that's what India is looking for. And that's what any country would look for. Even after the world wars, China felt bad that it was not recognized as one. Japan was insulted because they were not recognized as one of the powers. So most countries look for that kind of respect in the international arena. So I won't say that India is not looking forward to being recognized as a superpower, but pragmatically speaking, it would be the respect that we deserve. That's what they are looking for.
Not a doctor. So thank you for the insight. I do have a personal question that I would like to ask before I go on to the audience question, if it's possible. So if like a country having a nuclear weapon does not provide it the capability to become a superpower, then what does, like?
Well,
maybe a short answer. Yeah.
No, as a international relations scholar, I wouldn't say I'm not the hawk here. I am the dove. I hope you know the difference between the hawk and the dove here. I'm not for nuclear power. I am completely against the nuclear power. I'm the one who believes that it's a waste of money. So, instead of nuclear power, give me infrastructure, give me the skilled population. What's the point of having a nuclear power and not ever using it? What's the point of having it? Instead, the same money can be used for, promoting your infrastructure, promoting your own population. That would make you a superpower rather than having a nuclear weapon that is sitting in a storage. So I mean, personally, that's my belief. But in international relations, I mean, there are many scholars who believe that having a nuclear weapon has given India the capacity to produce a nuclear weapon, has given India the respect that it deserves. I don't think so, because it's only when India became, the middle class capital of the world, when India's buying power increased, that's when everybody started looking at India. Even now, everybody wants to establish a company in India because of the huge, the buying power that the people have here. Not because we have a nuclear weapon, but because of that market power that we have. So for me, that would be the reason why people would look at India, not nuclear weapon.
Thank you, Doctor. That is a very idealistic view. So we do have to go to the audience question.
Yeah.
So we have one question here. So will India's Western diplomacy provide the necessary impetus for the global community to come for a consensus regarding India's claim for a permanent seat at the UNSC?
That's the other point I was making, and I say the responsible regional power. That is what India is hoping for, and even our former Minister of State for External Affairs and Deputy Director General of United Nations, Shashi Tharoor, has written in an article saying that's the whole objective behind this vaccine diplomacy, is that India hopes that all of these countries will look at India as a responsible global power and include them into the Security Council. That's what even he is writing about. So there are many scholars who believe that that's the whole intention behind this vaccine diplomacy. I would say yes, that's one of the ways you would promote your own national interest, by getting into the Security Council. Of course, again, I differ from that view. I mean, I don't see an advantage in being in the Security Council, but that's a different point altogether. But yes, that's one of the objectives that India wants to pursue.
But getting a permanency in the UN Security Council depict India as a superpower. Maybe is that a reason why?
But it won't be just India who will get the Security Council, right? It would also be Brazil. It would also be probably Russia. Sorry, not Russia. Brazil, South Africa. All of these countries are also trying to represent their own continents in the Security Council. All of them also have the same aspirations. So these emerging powers, not the superpower, but as I said, one of those powers that want to be recognized as and respected as powers. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a superpower, it would be equal among the equals, is what I'm thinking.
Noted, Dr. Madhumati. Thank you very much. So we have another question from the audience to address. So in the wake of the new contagious disease, should free medication and medical supplies be highly paid or free?
Yeah, that's I think, one question that every country is struggling right now with, because there are, I mean, I've heard of many companies sponsoring these vaccines for free in India also, and in other countries as well, because that they are using it as companies' responsibility to make sure that they provide for security, health security. I personally feel that yes, vaccines should be subsidized by the government, because it does improve the human security, which in turn leads to the development within the country. Because if you can't inoculate your own population at the lowest price possible, then you're not actually securing the health of all of the people in the country. So I would say yes, government should subsidize the vaccines. They have done it here in India, but I'm not sure if many countries would like to do that, because it harms the liberal market that they try to promote. Because if there is competition in the pricing, then the companies would put in more effort in the research and development. If there's no competition, then why should they do it? But this is a question of, this is a pandemic that has come for the first time in our lives after liberal economy has become so big. So this is a test for that global economy. This is a test for liberal market views that, there are some cases wherein you have to have government intervention and let the government subsidize certain medicines or medical care just to make sure that everybody is inoculated and everybody is healthy. Only then it's possible to improve the economy. Otherwise, it's not possible to improve the economy.
So Dr. Madhumati, you did say like how India has come in to like, help immunize the population within India. But then, however, in news recently, we have been seeing like rising cases of COVID-19 in India. So like, so what does this say about like, does it reflect badly on like India's Western diplomacy? Like, should India have focused more inwards first, or yeah?
Yeah, I know that's. I think that was the question I was looking for the first question after my speech. But yeah, it is. The numbers are rising, and there is also, the doctors also have been saying that just because you have taken the vaccine doesn't mean that you have to give up on all of the other social distancing, masking norms that you're supposed to practice, because the vaccines are not as effective as they should be. And because we have prioritized certain groups of people, as I said, vaccine production is one point, but inoculation is the other question here. So to get the vaccines to the people is the question. And that's the infrastructure that we are talking about. So maybe, getting more people to get vaccination would be an answer to counter the rising cases. But it is taking time to inoculate everybody. The time that is taken, that's the problem that is leading to rising cases. And it's happening all over the world. It's not just in India, it's everywhere in the world. And the United States is seeing, they are trying to inoculate their own people, but the numbers keep rising even in the United States. So it doesn't matter how many you have, until and unless the whole population in the world is inoculated, I don't think we can get rid of the virus as easily. What happened in India was that we relaxed with the norms that we were supposed to follow. We relaxed with, we thought that there's no more cases, so maybe it's not as bad. And that relaxation cost a lot of, it cost the government a lot. So now they're back to enforcing those norms. Hopefully that'll go away.
Thank you, Doctor. Oh, you can say that we were saving the best questions for the last. Yeah.
Okay, another question. This is more in context to Singapore and Southeast Asia in general. With the Quad countries pledging to donate vaccines in the coming few years, and in terms of vaccines and financial aid as well, how do you think that the Southeast Asia will be affected? And does this collaboration on vaccines, could that mean that there could be further projects that they would work on?
Yeah, that's again a hope, right? Quad has been in practice. Quad has been there for the last 4 or 5 years, and they've been talking about it. It hasn't materialized into anything about security, but at least human security through this vaccine donation would probably be the best way to start off that kind of a collaboration among these countries. Because as we all have been talking about, international travel is the one that is most affected by this corona pandemic. So unless you inoculate the people and the countries that you will be traveling to, you can't hope that it will go away. Just because you are vaccinated doesn't mean that everybody else will be safe here. So you have to have the rest of the population vaccinated. Only then the global economy would pick up. So for the Quad countries as well, human security in order to pick up the economy is something that they have to concentrate on. So I'm glad they're talking about it. I'm glad they're doing it together so that it actually brings in more vaccines. United States is already developing other types of vaccines which may be more effective against the variants that we've been hearing about. And those companies are now sending that, that they're having collaboration with India to start producing in India with the other pharmaceutical companies. So Johnson & Johnson has had talks with Indian companies to produce those vaccines. So again, the same liberal market economy, there's a lot of competition among the companies in producing vaccines, which is good for all of us. So if the Quad countries can get together and increase that competition, bring in more vaccines, bring in more research and development, it's all the way better for everybody, not just India, but also for Southeast Asia, Singapore, any country that comes within the purview of that Quad.
Thank you, Doctor. So I think we are coming to the last question, and it's a passionate question from Mr. Lee Cheng Ting from the audience. So he has asked, the African countries and its people are the most disadvantaged in the queue for vaccines. Is India's campaign changing that? So would you be able to answer the question and maybe wrap up your final points a bit?
Yes, thank you. And yes, African countries are the disadvantaged ones, and this is where India's initial vaccine diplomacy had begun, not the pandemic one, but the one against HIV/AIDS virus. And India was the one who produced generic drugs to fight the HIV/AIDS, and the ones that were supplying all of those drugs to the African countries. The Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, that is also an alliance that India is donating vaccines to, and donates, money as well for that Gavi alliance, the Global Alliance. So yeah, India is trying to bring that in. Of course, Africa is a big market for India as well. And I talked about medical tourism. Many African nations look at India as a medical tourist destination because yes, it is cheaper and it is a viable option for them to come to India for medical treatment. So India is looking towards Africa, and the donations that it has made will also go to Africa. There is the competition with China in Africa, though. China was the one who supplied to Zimbabwe. China was the one who supplied to South Africa. So there is competition with China in the African countries. China has already made inroads into Africa. They are able to supply a lot of these drugs already to African countries. So India is also trying to do the same. Of course, the difference would be that maybe the humanist diplomacy trumps over the Chinese mercantile diplomacy. We have to wait and see.
So thank you, Dr. Madhumati, for sharing with us. So that was our last question from the audience, and we are coming to the end. So thank you very much. Like we can see that the sun has set in India already. So
yes, it is. I didn't get up to turn my light on. So yes.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us as well. So we do hope that India would be able to help the rest of the world and the country itself in helping to vaccinate. And hopefully we will all be come to a day where we will be free from COVID-19 and we can travel freely.
Yes.
So we look forward to meeting you in person. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Wonderful questions. And thank you to the audience.
You need to take the audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.